Have you ever wondered what it's like to be on the other side of the executive search desk? This is Matt Hug with Nonprofit.Courses bringing you a special presentation from GreatCareers-BENG. GreatCareers-BENG is a job transition and career maintenance organization with chapters up and down the East Coast of the United States and members from all over the world. And today we have with us Kimmi Cantrell from Careers in Nonprofits, an executive search and staffing firm based in San Francisco, Chicago, and Washington. And Kimmy's going to give us some insights on what it's like from her side of the desk. So let's get going. Welcome, Kimmi. Kimmi Cantrell is our guest today from Careers in Nonprofits. And thank you very much, Kimmi, for being with us. This is really a treat for us to find somebody who is in the hiring end of things for nonprofits. That's really great for a group like ours. And please tell us a little bit about yourself. How do you connect with all this?
For sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. And for those of you that mentioned you've seen me in the past, it's great to see you again. But for most of you, I think this is probably our first time ever being in touch. And I'm just really excited and grateful for the opportunity to do this. So I feel like, how I got here, I've been in the nonprofit staffing space for about 5 years. And prior to that, I was in a position that unfortunately too many people can empathize with, where I was unemployed and I live in DC. So I was in DC, which is a very competitive market, and very sad and very, confused and very lost and very frustrated because I felt like, I was a highly qualified candidate and would add a lot of value to many people's organizations, and nobody else apparently was feeling the same way. And so for about 8 months, upon my relocation to DC, coming from the Atlanta, Georgia area, I decided after, nannying for a long time and just trying to find ways to make ends meet. I was coming from higher education. I decided to pivot myself into the nonprofit sector. And within a week of doing that, I had reached out to Careers in Nonprofits for actually a position externally with one of their clients. And they didn't want to put me forward for that position because they wanted to keep me for themselves. And I'm so glad that they did. And I spent, every moment of those 8 months job searching, reminding myself that I would never take for granted the opportunity to have a job again. And I would never, take for granted being able to help people in the way that work allows us to help the greater good. And I also was determined that once I did get a job, I would do whatever I could to make that experience better for other people. And I hope I've been doing that every day since. And I think that's why my joy that I really get out of my job, we do a lot of dynamic things here at Careers and Nonprofits, but getting to talk to job seekers and help them find some encouragement and inspiration to just keep going and to recognize that they are, an amazing person and have a lot to offer, and that there are opportunities out there for them. That's really my passion for my work. So I'm really excited to be here today to tell you guys more about CNP, more about myself, more about the nonprofit sector, and hopefully in return, you'll learn more about yourself. So thank you again for having me.
Well, thank you so much. And that's a really great story to say that, yeah, there is hope here, even sometimes with an organization. You didn't expect that at all. So that's really cool. And it talks about the fortuity of a lot of job searches. So tell us about Careers in Nonprofits. You got a cool little mug there. You got anybody hasn't seen those mugs?
Yeah, a little bit of branding, but we actually give these mugs out to back in the day when we could do client visits. We would give these mugs out to anybody that we ever met with, because that's our goal, is to help people find a job that they love, and in return, helping nonprofit organizations love their job more because they have good employees on their team. And so that's really the gist of what CNP does. We are a boutique style staffing firm, small but mighty, we like to say. And what that really means is that, if you want to consider it equivalent to, coffee shops. So there is Starbucks, which is not us. Those are the big firms that have, hundreds of thousands of employees. And then there's your local mom and pop coffee shop, and that's who we are. So we've been around for 14 years, founded in 2006 in Chicago. We came to DC in 2008, and then we opened up an office in San Francisco in 2017. So while we're in those three cities, I think at max, we've had 20 employees. So we're a pretty small company, but we have been able to receive the clearly rated Best of Staffing award for the past 6 years, which only 2% of staffing firms in the country receive on both candidate and client satisfaction. So we may have not as large of a reach as some of the bigger firms, but every person we touch, we make a really great impact with, and that is our goal.
Well, that's great. That's very helpful. So what is the difference then that you do executive search and staffing, right? And what's the difference between them?
Great question. So executive search is exclusively executive level opportunities. And there are some firms who have an executive search group, or they have that all they do is executive search. And for us, we are a full desk staffing service. So we do everything from entry level up to VP senior executive level.
Okay.
And we do temporary and direct hire. So that's another difference, is that executive search is mostly just direct hire. But that's, your executive directors, your vice presidents, your CEOs, COOs, typically that, the executive level of organization. And so that's the only thing that is focused on when you hear the word executive search, whereas we focus on all of it.
Okay, that's great. Well, and actually, in my experience, at least, that's pretty unusual to have an organization that does that breadth of it.
We find that is true, but it's also unusual to have a firm that just focuses in the nonprofit sector. And so that's what we want. We want to be different. We have been doing this for 14 years, and we really love when we're able to have one nonprofit client and we help them with all things from finding their executive director to then finding the admin assistant that supports that person once they're placed. Wow. So it really allows us, an opportunity to see all ends of the spectrum and work with all types of job seekers, from the person who is looking for the last leg of their career and the person who just graduated college. So it's really exciting to get to work with people for multiple generations, if you will. And I think one of even the most fun parts of what we do is when we place a candidate and then 3 years later, they're looking for a new job and we place them again. We get to help them find their next opportunity. So, for some people, it helps them to have that niche of just like executive search or just temp. But for us, it really helps us to just have that niche of the nonprofit sector, which is really just mission-driven professionals.
Now, do you just work in those three markets, or are those kind of your bases from which you work into other areas?
You mean regionally, like where?
Yeah, like would you have clients in Philadelphia or in Richmond and then in Los Angeles out of San Francisco?
Definitely. And we have placed in Boston, we've placed in Atlanta, we've placed in Texas, we've placed in New York. We have our offices physically located in these places, but we train our team to be able to recruit anybody for anything. And so, we have our wheelhouse of things we do a lot, which is mostly development and fundraising, as I'm sure you can imagine, because that's the bread and butter of nonprofits. But we do a lot of administration, marketing, communication, programs, finance. And so, but that's not to say that if somebody comes to us and says, we need a case manager, we're willing to go find that person. It's the same skill set, of finding people.
For your side, yeah, right,
exactly.
That process.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, if we had a client come to us that's in the middle of nowhere, we're happy to take a stab at it. We obviously want to have that transparency of we've never had this territory before, but if you're willing to trust us to do it, we're excited to do it with you.
Okay, cool. And so what's the business model for executive search or staffing in terms of how you get paid versus, the people who are looking for the jobs, they're not paying for your services, correct?
No. And that's a common misconception. And I'm going to give a little, obviously I'm speaking on behalf of CNP, so I can't speak on what anybody says, but what I know is that we work on behalf of the nonprofit organization. So they're who pay us. It does not come out of the person's annual salary. That's another misconception, is that people think, well, if it's working with a recruiter, then my salary is going to be lower because they have to pay the recruiter. That's not how it works.
Actually, my experience is the salary tends to be higher.
I would agree. Because we have the ability and the toolkit to help you negotiate what you really desire. And also we have the opportunity at the beginning of a search, when an organization comes to us and they say, this is what we're looking to offer for a salary, we can say, oh, that's not really market value. You're going to get what you want more by looking in this range. And that goes both ways. If they're looking for an admin assistant, they're offering 100K. Well, you're not looking for an admin assistant, you're looking for an admin director, or you're looking for, you're just looking for something different. And so we really have the opportunity to help with those types of conversations. And so, certainly.
By the way, everybody who is on this call is going to apply for that 100K admin assistant.
But circling back, there's no cost to a job seeker to work with us. And I would strongly encourage, if you find a recruiter who charges you as a job seeker, that you should look for somebody else. Because there's really it's a very hard business model to, and not fair, like the job seeker is looking for a new opportunity. You can definitely find people who are career coaches. That's totally different. Resume help, totally different. Cover letter help. There's many services that I think do make sense to, invest in, if you will. But if you find a recruiter who is asking you to pay them money, I definitely would encourage you to perhaps just find other recruiters, because there's lots out there that you won't have to pay for, and they still want to and are happy to help you.
That's good. That's really good advice. So the other part, and imagine that goes with staffing too, right? Not just executive search, but the same rules apply in the staffing side. So a lot of folks will say to me, well, I need to find a recruiter to get me a job. Is that your job?
No. That's another misconception. And that's one thing I think that really sets us apart. We really do our best to take a more personal approach to staffing and to recruitment. And so we're going to be very transparent. We're going to give you any and all feedback that we have. But at the end of the day, our job is to fill the roles of our nonprofit clients, because they're the ones who pay our bills, right? They're the ones who keep our lights on and keep our people employed.
Well, so that's interesting. So I mean, just your verbiage there, they're the clients. They're the people you're serving.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we consider the nonprofit organizations the client, whereas we consider, the job seeker as a candidate. And so in that, that scenario, our job is to help fulfill the open need of the nonprofit organization. And that's not to say that we don't also help people get jobs. That's how we fill the position. But that's not at what I'm getting to is that's not our full responsibility is helping you find your job. And so whenever we're meeting with candidates, we always encourage people, reach out to other firms, connect with as many recruiters as possible, because, just because I'm not working on the perfect opportunity for you doesn't mean that somebody right down the street is, like there's plenty of people who have, clients that I don't have. And so maybe they have the perfect position for you. And we don't require exclusivity on either end. So we encourage people to, put as many, have as many relationships as you can with people, because I think that's really where you're going to find the sweet spot is, don't put all your eggs in one basket of one firm. You may like me the best because I'm amazing, but I do encourage you to reach out to other firms and other recruiters, because just the more people that have your back, the more likely you are to get something moving along faster.
That's funny you say that. Well, I mean, it's great you say that, right? But it kind of, it kicks back to a synapse that I had from years and years gone by, when when employers would get I don't know, angry, but they wouldn't like that you were applying for multiple jobs. Well, you applied for my job. What do you mean you applied for somebody else's job? Right?
Yeah,
And this is not the world we're in these days.
it's not, and it's been so right before the pandemic, which, as people like to say, is unprecedented. Right before this, it was such a candidate driven market that, I mean, we expected that anybody we were working with had 2 or 3 other offers on the table already, and people really had the opportunity to choose what it is that they wanted. And that's still kind of the case. People really, employers are noticing that through this pandemic, even the employee is really who has the power, and so if the employee is dissatisfied, because the amount of people that have come to us through this pandemic because they're looking for something new, because they don't appreciate the way that their employer reacted to the situation, or handled the pandemic, or treated their employees. Yeah, people are realizing, if your employees aren't satisfied, you don't really have a business. The business doesn't exist without the people. And so, with that mindset, it really changes things, because you recognize that you have a little more power. Whereas back in, 2008, 2009, it was just like, I will take whatever job you have, please give me any opportunity. And so things have really evolved since then. So, like I said, we expect that we're doing negotiations almost every offer that comes out, because even if it's just a counter offer from people's organization, like, people want to cling to strong talent. And it's a great place to be. It can also be a little stressful sometimes, because you're like, what do I choose? I have so many options, but it's a good position to be in.
All right, cool. Well, now, so what are the steps you take to identify good candidates?
Great question. I do a lot of things like this, where I'm networking with job seekers, because we like to do a proactive recruitment process. So sure, we do the headhunting, that whole spiel.
Dial for candidates kind of thing, right?
Yeah, but what we like to do is meet with general candidates each week, and in an effort that we're going to open your job in 2 months, and then we already have you ready to go. And so we network a lot, and now it looks a lot different than it used to, but we used to be going to networking events. Each recruiter would go to 2 per month, and we're just meeting new people so that they're in our network and in our repertoire, if you will. And so when we open up positions, they're in our database, they receive that email, and then they're already interested, and we already know who they are, versus exclusively headhunting, which definitely works, and we definitely find a lot of the people that we place through headhunting that way. But oftentimes, honestly, we'll find them through headhunting for one position, and they end up getting placed for a different one. And so we just find that more proactive recruitment process is a lot more beneficial for everybody involved, and it just allows us to move things along much faster.
So now you've said something that I didn't realize the nuance of difference between. So when people describe what you do broadly, they say, well, Kimmi's a headhunter, but it sounds like headhunting is something more narrowly defined for you.
So we would consider headhunting if I'm working on, I'm going to use the example director of development, because that's probably the position we place the most often. Sure. So I opened up a director of development for an education-based organization. I need somebody with 10 plus years of experience with major gifts. So I would go to LinkedIn and I would literally look up director of development, major gifts, 10 plus years of experience. And I would go reach out to that person, though they did not apply to my job. And I would say, I'm working on this position. Are you interested in learning more? To us, that's what headhunting is.
Okay.
Even going to similar types of organizations that are education based and reaching out to their director of development.
Put a case or whatever and find out. Yeah.
Exactly. And then reaching out to them. So that's people who aren't actively job searching. Those are passive people. They had no reason to say, claim interest in my position, but I just did a little, hey, are you interested?
Yeah, right. No, that's good.
Which, sometimes people don't appreciate. Sometimes people are like, no, I love my job. I'm satisfied. I'm not looking. And so that's why, we are looking more for the people who we know have an interest in being talked to by us, and have an interest in looking for something new, and already put them in our candidate pool. So when something opens up, we consider those people, in theory, first.
All right. So that's helpful. That really is. So now, what are the top skills that people are looking for employees? Obviously, you said fundraising is one of them, right?
Yes. With fundraising, that's just so useful in the nonprofit sector because, like I mentioned, that's the bread and butter. Every organization is funding in some capacity, whether it's through grants from the government, from, individual donors, major gifts, etc. So the more understanding you can have with different areas of fundraising, obviously that's just helpful.
And I imagine just revenue generation broadly is,
Exactly.
yeah.
But it's interesting because if you work in IT, why do you need to know about fundraising? And you don't per se, but speaking the language is helpful. And there's a lot of free courses out there. I know, what's the organization called? Candid.
Yep.
They do a lot of like free and very affordable resources or webinars.
Well, and look, Nonprofit.Courses.
Exactly, about where you can just like learn more tips and tools, and you can just understand, if I say major gifts and you don't know what that means, it's just helpful even if you're in IT, so that you can speak the language of your colleagues.
Yeah.
So that's a hard skill, but honestly, I really think this year especially, people really want adaptability or nimbleness, because you never know. I mean, I think this year has taught us, if nothing else, that we have no guarantee of what happens tomorrow. And so even if you are an IT person, like, you may have to pick up some prospecting calls from the development department. You just don't know, because anything could happen. And so I really feel like this year, what I've noticed from any client we've worked with is like, I need somebody who's going to be flexible. We're onboarding virtually for the first time, and I don't want them to judge me for that. Like, just being able to add a little more humanity back into it, I think has actually been a really great thing that's come out of this pandemic. But I do feel like the ability to be adaptable and flexible is really, really important in the nonprofit sector.
That's cool. That's helpful.